Have you ever learned from an online course? Or had to take one and had no clue how to find assignments or information you needed to be successful? Well, the digital age is well upon us, and self directed learning is only becoming more and more prevalent. Today on Educational Leadership Exchange, I sat down with University of Ottawa Masters of Education student Brianna McElroy to discuss her master's thesis on discussion boards in the online classroom and issues uniquely linked to online learning. I'm the host and producer, Kristin Schmidt, and you're listening to Educational Leadership Exchange.
We need critical thinkers in our classrooms. We need critical thinkers in our society. And I think it's one thing to say that you're developing critical thinkers, and it's another thing to actually do it.
Before we got to talking about online learning, Brianna and I talked about her past and what made her really interested in becoming an educator. So here's a little bit about her before we get into the details.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
So, how did you develop an interest in education?
Well, for me, I developed an interest in education quite a while ago. I think it really started I was always somebody who hated being sick when I went to school. I always was the kid who was like, I can't wait to go back to school. I've always loved the school setting and what it does. Not only because I always loved learning, but also the social aspects of it as well. When I was in university, people kept telling me, like, Brianna, you should be a teacher. We can see you as like a grade 7 or grade 4 teacher. And it kind of planted the seed, but at the same time, I was really interested in science and was doing genetics. And so I thought, you know what, maybe, should I do teaching? No. And then maybe not. Maybe I should do it. So after I finished my undergrad, I decided to take some time off to figure out what it really was that I wanted to do. So I moved to Alberta, worked in administration and student affairs and campus life with students transitioning from high school to university. And I really just always enjoyed the atmosphere of a school setting still, because I was still at university. I started dabbling a bit more in the sciences in terms of I started to volunteer at the genetic unit of the Calgary Children's Hospital to see, like, is that what my degree's in that? Is that what I want to do? But for some reason, teaching just kept pulling me back. And so finally I decided to take the jump and apply for the B.Ed because I knew it was going to be a 2-year program. And with my age and experience, I thought, you know what, I would really prefer to do it in one. So let's see if I can even get in. I put all my eggs in one basket, applied to one school, got in, and then once I got in, I'm like, oh, do I do it or do I not? I have a pretty good job in Alberta right now. But I thought, you know what, if I don't do it, I'm always going to regret it. And
why do you only choose one school?
Because that was I was putting all my eggs in one basket. Like, if it's meant to be, I'll get accepted to Ottawa U because it's closer to my family, it's closer to home. If I'm moving back to Ontario, I'm going to move back for a purpose. I want to be closer to my family, which I was away for so long. So I applied to one school and one school only, and was very fortunate that I got in. And then I thought, well, maybe that's the sign that I should go. Mm-hmm. So I spent 2 months sitting on it before I officially sent in my resignation at the university I was working at, and then moved back in August of 2013. And yeah, so happy I did, because once I was in the classroom and exploring different things again, I was like, yes, this is what I really enjoy doing. And then I wanted to explore farther and challenge myself and my own abilities, and so that's why I decided to go and apply for the master's program.
What's your thesis on?
So my thesis is looking at the critical thinking development in pre-service teachers by using online discussion boards. And so in a course a couple of years ago, after I finished my B.Ed, a prof approached me and asked me some questions about some feedback on a course that I had been a part in with them, and said, like, the feedback for the overall course, the evaluations were awful, and here's some of the feedback we got. I shouldn't say they were awful. They weren't as good as she had hoped they would be. So what can we do to encourage participation or get people involved in the course, and not making it feel like it was not valuable to them. And so I said, well, what about introducing, like, we had discussion boards, but it was a group discussion. So what would happen is that a group of us would get together and then post one thing on behalf of the 5 or 6 of us. And my feedback for that was I found it really difficult because some people weren't contributing, some people didn't care, and all of a sudden it was left on the shoulders of 2 or 3 people that were going to carry the entire group. So we kind of chatted about that, and we decided to move. I said, what about individual posts? Like, everybody has to post. And then that's the concept of encouraging people to go on and read other people's posts so that they can kind of get a discussion going beyond the hour and 30 minutes they spent together in a classroom. So that's where it kind of started. And then as we were going through it, we noticed that there were some really rich discussions happening. And so then as I was entering in the MA program, I still didn't know what my thesis was going to be on. I was interested in administration. I was interested in rural schooling. And so then I started to look at critical thinking and what has been done for pre-service teachers in that area, and found that there has been a lot of work done on discussion boards. But the discussion boards, in terms of the research that was done on discussion boards with pre-service teachers, it was all pre and post testing in a quantitative context. So I was like, well, what about the qualitative context? Like, what was the perspective of the students who were taking part in the online discussion boards?
So when you say quantitative versus qualitative, you mean like taking a test?
Yeah, so they would take
online?
So they would take pre and post testing, so that the people who are enrolled in courses would take a pre-test, and then when the course was over, they'd take a post-test, and then they compare the results and be like, oh yes, these online discussion boards are promoting critical thought, or the critical thinking abilities of these pre-service teachers are going up. So, which is great, but at the same time I thought, well, what about the people who are actually taking part in these? So is critical thinking going, how is it going up? Like, what are the contexts behind it? So what I'm trying to look at is, with the course that was redesigned in 2014 by introducing discussion boards. It was only done for 2 sections of an overarching course that every BEd student took. But really looking at what was the experience with it, where did they feel, was it like beneficial to them? Did it make them think in a different way? And really getting that aspect. But I also want to look at the posts in general. So are we able to look at the postings that were done and comparing it to different critical thinking models? And then what I would like to do is to look at it through the lens of the objective knowledge growth framework of asking questions and doing different things. By looking through it with that lens afterwards, can we then connect critical thought and critical thought development and knowledge growth through the OKGF in an online discussion board? So that's kind of what I'm going forward through. So right now I'm going to be using the objective knowledge growth framework, the OKGF, as a lens to view the discussions through, and then I might be able, depending on what I find, I might be able to make a discussion in regards to that. If students are introduced to the OKGF, or pre-service teachers I should say, right off the bat, they may be able to use that as a guide or as a tool for them to develop their critical thought process.
Critical thought in Teachers College? Who would have thunk? No. I'm thinking back to my own experience in Teachers College. There was opportunities for critical thought, but not so much on the online portions. Like, I did a online class in law, and it was mostly, here are the laws you need to know, and then you do a quiz. But to engage in critical thought online is something that is not happening as much as it could be. So it's really interesting to hear Brianna talk about that and talk about how she's going to think about it. Now, up next on Educational Leadership Exchange, we talk a little bit, Brianna and I, about the objective knowledge growth framework. So it gets a little theoretical, but I think you're in for a treat.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind explaining OKGF?
Yeah, so the OKGF is
Wait, what does this stand for again?
Objective Knowledge Growth Framework.
Okay.
And so basically what it is, it's based off of the critical rationalism of Sir Karl Popper. And what it is it's basically saying it could be argued that it's a decision-making model. That's kind of what it's best known for, but it's also very much a reflective process as well. And so it's cyclical in nature, basically that you start off with a question. And so you pose a problem or a question that you want to answer. And then you discuss or you think about tentative theories or ideas that may help you solve the problem or the question that you've asked or anything along those lines. From there, you go through a process which is called error elimination. And so what you do is you take a look at your proposed theories of what might work or what might solve, and then you eliminate different ones based on the errors that you can find in there. So by asking different things or going, well, that won't work because of this, or this isn't the best solution because of this. And from that, what it actually emerges is a new problem or a new question that you can then pose. And so it's cyclical because you can actually go through the process numerous times until you arrive at a solution or a statement or an answer that best suits what's in front of you, so that you can then go forward with the best possible solution for your answer. It may not be the right one, but at that time, it's the best possible one. And so it's always open to criticism and whatnot, and you can go back to the table afterwards and go, well, at the time I thought it was the best answer, but it doesn't prevent you from saying that is the best, it's correct, it's always right, because you can receive feedback on it, and then you can go back to the board again and continue those cycles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like trying to think of an example. I don't know, like as an online discussion. So would you have like a pre-service teacher who's in their practicum, maybe have a student with special needs, say dyslexia, and they post a question online to their colleagues? Would it work that way, where they say, I want to do a novel study, but I have a student with dyslexia who can't read the novel? Is it that kind of problem that you would deal with, or?
Yeah, it could be. That could be one way. Another one would be, say, for example, so when critical thought is involved in something, what you're doing is you're challenging assumptions or a belief set that you already have. Okay. So say, for example, somebody were to tell you that, I don't want to use that one. We'll say that Australia is the best country in the world.
Okay.
But you as an individual think that Canada is the best country in the world. But it's because you already have a bias or you have a base of knowledge of why you think that's the case. So by posting online, the discussion might be like, discuss why Australia is the best country in the world. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden now you're checking your assumptions and whatnot and going like, well, why? Here's the problem is I don't think that Australia is the best country. Why is that the case? Here's all my possible solutions. I'm going to eliminate some errors because, that doesn't really make sense. That doesn't really make sense. And then you may come to a new question. So it's that series of asking questions. Eventually may get to like, you know what, after some thought, I might be able to say that Australia is the best country in the world based on this information. However, I would like to bring to the table a new question for everybody to consider, and that would be, why isn't Canada the best country? Because we have the same, I don't know, I'm making stuff up here because I don't know Australia is like the back of my hand, but we have similar governments, we have similar laws, we have similar X, Y, Z. So why can't we say that Canada is actually the best country? So it's going through that and challenging your assumptions and your belief sets so that you're building a new set of knowledge, because maybe you never looked at something that had happened in Australia before and be like, oh, well, that's how they dealt with it, or anything like that. But then you pose a question to the group, and so it's that new push of knowledge that's saying, I see your question, I've taken into consideration what's going on, but I'm posing a new one. And it's that kind of, with critical thought as well, it's that idea of you have an internal world and you have an external world. So you're able to internalize different ideas and thoughts, but then you put it out to your external world to get feedback on those thoughts. Because then maybe the new question you have posed makes other people think in a different way. So for those people who are like, no, Australia is by far only the best country, here's why, all of a sudden now they have to take into consideration like, oh, well, I never knew that Canada had all of these things. Why am I arguing that Australia is the best? So that's kind of the whole concept of critical thought and critical ability, is just posting a question that may push boundaries or may push assumptions or a belief set that somebody has. And then by being able to ask yourself a whole bunch of questions because something in you may have been jarred or upset by that statement or question. So then you start to go and you start to look at, well, where's my knowledge coming from? Why is this upsetting me? And what more can I add to the discussion? So
cool. Where do you see it like applied in the BEd program?
So
what courses?
Really? Well, it could be with anything really. So with critical, like right now, the concept, I don't want to say the concept, but the like critical thinking skills, abilities, whatever you would like to call them. I think skill and abilities very close in nature. But it's really being talked about because it's the whole concept of, I can't remember who said it right now, but I have a great quote in my proposal that says, we should be teaching people we should be teaching people how to think, not what to think. And so in education, critical thinking is like it's a buzzword in education right now because people are putting out there like, oh, we need critical thinkers in our classrooms and we need critical thinkers in our society. And I think it's one thing to say that you're developing critical thinkers and it's another thing to actually do it. So with this being applied in the BEd program, it's more so of bringing to light how another way or another technique that BEd candidates, previous service teachers, can use to develop their own critical thinking abilities instead of just taking stuff as fact, right? That's what it is that if somebody tells you that blue is the best color in the world, and you're like, yes, blue is the best, there's no question. It's challenging those assumptions. And so instead of being in the classroom and saying that, I don't know, 2 + 2 is 4, it's having the kids actually say, well, why? Why is it that? Why can't it be this? And it's through that exploration that you're able to you want students asking questions, and you want those exploratory ideas to move and think so that they can develop knowledge in a different way than just being told that here's this, memorize it, you need to know it in order to be able to pass. So it's that kind of concept. It's developing that techniques in teachers so that they can then challenge their students when they're in the classroom.
Oh, okay. So you're hoping it'll go down the ladder in a way. So you teach these critical thinking skills to the teachers and then they'll pass it on to the students.
I think that would be the ultimate goal, right? Right now, really what I'm looking at is you can say anything works for anything. But can discussion boards, by looking at it through a certain lens, can we see connections to a certain framework that we can then encourage people to use so that they can develop those skills and techniques?
Okay.
You're listening to Educational Leadership Exchange. I'm your host, Kristin Schmidt. Thanks for listening so far, guys. Thought we'd just take a break to mention, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, compliments, you can send an email to cpln@cpln.info. That's with the Canadian Principal Learning Network, who we're hosted by, as well as the University of Ottawa, and founded by Dr. Stephanie Chitpin. Coming up next, we talk about online discussion boards and how we can make it more interesting and more critical in our thinking.
So if we're going down the ladder, and your online discussions work really well with the in pre-service teachers. Would you hope that the pre-service teachers would set up a online discussion for their high school students?
Yeah, well, I think it's where this could then be taken, right, is that online learning is fast and fiercely growing. And it's because of the technology that we have, the amount of time that people have to spend online, right? Like even at university settings, we have complete online courses, we have hybrid courses, we have in-class. And what's happening now is that high school students are really moving into that light as well. So there is complete online courses for students anywhere from physics, chemistry, math, civics and careers, English, any course can be now done online for a high school student. So I think where this may come into play is that if and when BEd students get their degree, become teachers, and they may find themselves in the very near future that they're actually an online teacher. Well, what does that mean for them in an online context? Are they just the wizard behind the screen giving away marks? Or how can they maybe encourage a more thought-provoking and challenging course that's online, that instead of having students just potentially scroll, and I should say that this is coming from my experience working with students who I've seen work in online courses at the high school level. Instead of actually engaging with the material, they're scrolling through to see what lessons have an assignment attached to them. I'm just going to look at that lesson, and I'm going to try to figure it out from there. But I don't care about the first 4 that set me up to succeed in the 5th one. For example,
do what you got to do. Basically,
you do what you got to do to get by. So how, if that's what's happening in online learning, are you learning anything? You might be learning something, but you're actually not building. You're not growing knowledge. You're not challenging that. And that's the big distinction between learning and knowledge growth. Knowledge growth is that asking questions, challenging assumptions, building up your foundation with more knowledge and more information, versus just learning where it's, I've done rote memorization. I know these 5 things. I'm good to go. So that's where I could see this potentially being applied at some point, is that if it could be done in class or in an online medium. So if you also have teachers going into the classroom and they maybe know that all of their students are really into a certain discussion board or thread, well, why not do it for them? And maybe they'll engage with the course content at home as well as in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of different places where this could be applied or introduced, but right now I'm interested to see how the BEd students are dealing with it. But because I think if it could go down the ladder, I think that's a lot of awesome research that could be done, and potentially there is some out there that is already looking at that. I'm just not aware of it. So yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I had a friend. She went to a high school outside of the Ottawa area, and they didn't offer calculus in her grade 12 year, so she had to do it online, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
And I know a student right now who's doing grade 12 university chemistry online, and chemistry in itself is difficult, let alone to learn an entire course. It's also self-directed learning, right? So it's that desire to do it, and a lot of students today they're trying to get by with extracurriculars and work and trying to apply for university, college, especially when they're in that senior level. They have a lot to balance, and so a lot of times certain things fall to the wayside, and if they can think that they can get by just doing what's needed to be done on an online course, because really nobody's there watching them, then I think there's a lot to be said of how that could be improved, or if we know that students are doing this, and how can we better engage them in the process.
I can totally understand what you mean by going to find what they need to do, because I do that even in a master's course.
Yeah, I
do
did
that.
Sometimes I did too. I had so much going on. But I found that the courses where I actually had to write something, or I had to engage with people online, all of a sudden I'm going, oh well, they've made I have to respond to something. Okay, well let me read all of these.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, as I'm reading them, I'm getting those ideas, and I'm going, I didn't see it like that. Great point. Like, blah, 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 blah. I'm responding now, but I'm also engaging more in the content. And so, because I know I've done it too, where you skip and like, what do I need to get done?
Or even just, I'm thinking of, those food blogs where they have somebody's talking about the Mexican fiesta they made, and they have like the taco recipe at the very bottom.
Yeah.
And at the start, it's like, oh, I got the flour from here, I got this from here, and this from here. You probably want to use this lime juice instead of that lime juice.
Yeah.
But you are like, okay, I just need the recipe.
Yeah, just scroll, give me the recipe. Like lime juice, I can get lime juice anywhere.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But then, so we have the background knowledge that we can make that recipe, but a lot of times with the content of a course, you don't necessarily have the background knowledge to be able to do as good a job as you could.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that I was trying to think of how it would apply to me now.
Yeah.
Done my master's.
Yeah, no, for sure. And for me, I just see it firsthand a lot when I watch students who are doing online courses.
Mm-hmm.
And even how and by being able, as I help some students with online courses, and I'm allowed to, I've been given permission by the teacher to be a part of the course so that I can see what they're actually supposed to be learning so I can help them. Sometimes how different ones are set up, I'm like, this doesn't even make sense to me. How are students supposed to find the material that they need? So even that is an interesting concept as well, too. And
yeah, that's true. There's a certain usability
Mm-hmm.
or content design that comes into play when you have an online course. Because the textbook, physical, hard textbook, you have in your hands. I mean, students will still just go to the questions and forget about the lesson.
Where are the questions are?
Look on the page before. That's where the answer is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never do it. But like now, suddenly the teachers who are used don't necessarily have the skills to design the website.
Mm-hmm.
To deliver the content online.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I think there's so much as we keep moving forward in this online world. It's going to be really interesting to see how things break down at once.
Do you think that in the future, BEd programs might offer use it like how to design an online website?
I don't know. I think,
or is that the platform? Like the software developer will just develop a basic platform and you fill stuff in.
I think it's a little bit of both. I know that I'm sure they still have it at Ottawa U, but they had a technologies course where you could take as one of your electives, and so a lot of people got to learn how to use different aspects of Google and set up really cool stuff. And apparently he's like, man, I should have took that course, because there's some really fascinating things that other people in my cohort were doing, and I'm like, I would love to learn how to do that, but I decided to take this elective because it spoke more to me at the time. But I also think that a lot of once you get into a school board and you do different things, a lot of software is developed, it's hired by the board potentially, and then everybody within the board is using that platform, especially for online courses. But it also doesn't stop teachers from setting up Google sites. There's another one, little blogs and individual websites that they can set up where their students can go and explore.
Every student in the Ottawa Carleton District School Board has their own email through Google.
Wow.
Is it not the same for
outside
boards?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think they do.
Every single student has their own Gmail now. It's really interesting because you're in a computer class and the students are working, but then they also have their email open because they're all sharing their files and working together through the
Google Docs.
Google Docs, right? Which is excellent.
Oh,
and
they're great.
You look at their email list and it's like, hey, what's up? And they're having little conversations on the side through their email.
That's too funny.
A whole new social aspect to it as well.
But it is. I find it, and I'm interested to see part of as I go through the interviews is for my research is what were their experiences with it, and was it challenging, and did they find it? Because maybe that is something that could pop up as a social connection or a social aspect to it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always hard to convey tone through typing and stuff like that. I found that with the online courses, you have to just go formal. Dear so-and-so, I really enjoyed your point about this.
Yeah.
However, I feel you have to very academic, which makes sense in an academic setting. But for some of the younger students, it's how do you balance academic writing versus your text conversation?
Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah. What's up?
Good point.
Yeah.
5 exclamation marks.
Yeah. With how are you? With what are you doing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, I see. So I'm interested to see where it leads, and I don't know what type of results I'm going to get in my research, but hopefully it'll be something interesting. I'm sure for some it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Educational Leadership Exchange, Episode 3. I'm the producer and host, Kristin Schmidt, and my interview today was with Masters of Education student Brianna McElroy. Educational Leadership Exchange is brought to you by the Canadian Principal Learning Network and the University of Ottawa and Dr. Stephanie Chitpin. Please send us an email and let us know what you thought at cpln@cpln.info. If you have any questions for our interviewee, Brianna, I'd be happy to pass them along. Thanks for listening to Educational Leadership Exchange.